What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So I couldn't believe it. Yesterday, the hot topic, the big thing that was being sent to me like 40 or 50 times on Twitter, even through email, was about a new Nintendo Switch possibly showing up next year. And I looked at it and I said, well, all right, this will go over well in the comments section on Newswave tomorrow, because of course we like to cover some of the bigger topics that take place in the last 24 hours. So here we are. That's right, fire up the CJ memes. We'll go over what's going on here and why people are really starting to believe the idea of this. I think it's specifically where it's coming from and some of the information in there that's getting that confidence up for this actually happening. It's only been like 4 years, so yeah, it'll happen eventually. Also, we get to talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon, as we have a release date for that. Exciting stuff. And I want you guys to take a look at some supposed leaks for the RTX 3090, because they're absolutely hilarious. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're brand new here, hit that red subscribe button down below. We're working to hit 500,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Guys, today we're going to start with DLSS 2.0. We've talked about it at length, but I still think there are some questions about performance gains at times, because you'd be using one of the newer cards. Maybe you're saving for Ampere, right? Maybe you want this 3090, for example, that may cost like $1,400 or $1,500. We'll get into that later. But let's say you have a newer card now and you're curious about what the performance gains would be. Well, check this out. This is from F1 2020. It actually got DLSS support yesterday, and we had some of those really cool looking benchmark charts get put out here, and it does show some substantial gains, actually, even for like an RTX 2060 Super, getting over 60 frames per second at 4K in this game, whereas before it would struggle to see even 40, and every card saw fairly large jumps in its average frame rate. That is super impressive. And keep in mind, DLSS 2.0 is something that NVIDIA is leveraging now and could even be leveraged in a future Tegra, maybe something that the Switch gets way down the line as a next-gen system years and years from now. And that would make it so that an image that is of lower quality resolution, using deep learning super sampling, moving up to something that looks almost native resolution, according to a lot of people who have tried it. I'm still not sure on that one, but it's certainly something that NVIDIA has worked to develop here, and I'm sure it'll continue to get better, but it's hard to ignore frame rate jumps like that. Also, I have seen some questions about the video game awards that should be coming up, obviously, towards the end of this year, but because we are seeing so many postponements and cancellations of different events, people seem unsure if it will still happen, but Jeff Keighley did talk with IGN and try to lay some of those fears to rest, saying, yeah, what I will say about it is we have a very interesting plan for the show this year. We're definitely doing it. A lot of people are asking, are you delaying it? The Oscars are being postponed. Are you postponing the Game Awards? We are absolutely not. We'll share more in the coming weeks about it, but it's actually probably going to be our biggest show yet. We are obviously not going to have 10,000 people in a room together physically for the show, but I think you'll see a little bit of this with how we do Gamescom. We're definitely doing more than just me in a room announcing winners. I'm really passionate about still doing the show live versus something pre-recorded. So yeah, we're working on some scenarios for ways we can present the show live with a bit of spectacle to people without the public being able to buy tickets to come to the show and things like that this year. So yes, the biggest thing obviously is we want to see the reveals. Like, I mean, yeah, it's cool. Okay, like the big winners. Really, it's cool when you see like an indie game win something pretty big too, or even just being nominated like Celeste was that year. But most of us tune in to see the brand new games or any cool things that could take place with new reveals. So I think as long as they have those, they can still kind of have a show that's a little more withdrawn when it comes to the overall presentation and all of that. But good to hear it's still coming up, because that's usually something we mark on a calendar to see some new games. Oh, and for everyone out there that has been asking me when NHL 21 is coming out, because yes, I do see you guys down there in the comments. I've been paying attention here and there. I know it's not a franchise that EA touts and blows up like they do with things like Madden and FIFA, but NHL 21 has been announced for its release date, October 16th. It's coming out on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Won't be coming out this year for next generation consoles, although I guess it could still be backwards compatible, right? As long as the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5 would allow it. But yes, there you go. Everyone who was asking about NHL 21, and it looks like Alex Ovechkin will be the cover athlete for it. So look forward to it in a couple of months. You should be able to pick it up. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're going to jump right into this Switch Pro, this next generation Switch situation that really exploded online yesterday after a newspaper claimed to have information about manufacturing that was going to be taking place pretty soon, with production starting up later on this year for this. It's hard to really tell because the translations have been kind of all over the place here. Push Dustin was able to help me with this just to verify. It does seem like the paper is mentioning it as a next generation device, but I think most of us look at that and say, I mean, would Nintendo really stop and go, well, the Switch is doing so well, let's just make a brand new Switch for a brand new generation right now? Probably not, and that's why it kind of leans more into the idea of a family of Switch systems, right? One that would still play the same games, but you have more options. Anyway, let's go over here because Nintendo Everything did also do translations as well and had a pretty good list of all of the information that was important in the paper here. And this is from Economic Daily News out of Taipei. And it says, the new Switch will begin production as soon as Q4 2020 fiscal year. So the fourth quarter is right at the beginning of the calendar year. So like January, February, March. So it would begin production in there, and it would be geared to launch Q1 fiscal year 2021, which would be the following 3 months. So April, May, or June. And then they have Macronix, PixArt, and Welltrend included in the list of manufacturers for next gen Switch. Looks like Macronix would handle like flash memory, for example. PixArt appears to be working on Joy-Con controllers, so that could be something that they really try to alter and change, as there have been a lot of people complaining about the drift anyway. Why not play around with the Joy-Con, see if you can change them up, and hey, they might be compatible with the current Switch. That's something I would expect. And then Welltrend appears to do a number of power ICs for the current Switch now. The new Switch would have better interactions, communications, which they say more interactivity, and will have a new display quality. Not surprising to hear that. Sharp has even touted, what, a year or two ago, that they were providing parts for it, which may refer to a more crisper output, not necessarily a resolution bump. Macronix is the manufacturer, produces the NOR flash chipsets used for storage media on the Switch, and they go on to explain the others. Okay, so they did not at all mention NVIDIA, which tells me that this paper probably has no idea if it's a next-gen Switch, if it's a Pro Switch, and I'm probably here to damage expectations. I'm not sure. I think it's still going to use the X1. I don't think it's going to have any kind of jump. I think this could be like a 3DS to new 3DS jump, if there is one, okay? So this is at the manufacturing level. Things appear to be changing according to this paper, and we've heard this before. I feel like in the past, we did hear that the Switch Lite was coming, right? Like that was the big thing at the time. It was like, oh, they're doing the Switch Mini or the Switch Lite. We called it the Switch Mini at the time, but I wasn't sold on the idea of a Switch Pro. I thought it would just be the Mini. It made the most sense business-wise. Now we're getting into, well, we're into the Switch's fourth year. We're gonna be coming up on the fifth year next year. If Nintendo will do one of these revisions, which, I mean, they do tons of revisions for their handhelds, and they do some for their home consoles at times, right? This would be the time to do it. If they don't do it at the start of next year, you might as well just ride it out till next gen. There's really no point, I think anyway, unless you're gonna make an even cheaper system. So I like the idea of them doing quality of life upgrades. Interactivity thing is strange. I'm not 100% sure on what they will do with that, but it sounds like they could be altering around the Joy-Cons, change those thumbsticks out, get something better in there. That to me would be the biggest thing, right? To kind of, I guess, push back against the whole drifting situation that's going on. And maybe they have some other little things that they would, point out as being this massive big deal, like cameras for voice chat, video chat, or like a microphone on the system or something little, and then they just pretend like it's this big new thing. But I don't expect a next generation system to launch next year, okay? Not at all. I think Nintendo would even like squash that rumor, but keep in mind, they would not announce this thing. Let's say it's coming out next April. They wouldn't announce it till March. They're definitely not going to acknowledge this thing before the holidays, okay? Because that would obviously kill their holiday. It's going to stay a rumor for like 5 or 6 months, and then we'll find out if this actually has any weight behind it. But like I said, it's been 4 years, so it's gonna happen eventually, at least this or a next-gen system when the generation runs out. Next up, let's talk about a pretty cool PlayStation 5 patent that was found. Now, patents don't always tend to be used, but they are filed by Sony, in this instance, for the PlayStation 5, and this one sounds like something that could actually be added into the firmware down the road, or maybe even at launch. We still haven't seen the UI, by the way. You know, it's like 2 months out from when the system launches. Haven't seen the UI, don't know the price, don't know the release date, but let's talk about this patent. All right, so take a look at this. This apparently is a way that Sony is playing around with you to be able to log into the system without having to punch in a password or really do anything with like a camera for recognizing your face or even assigning a profile to a controller. No, according to this, telemetric data would be transmitted as soon as a controller is picked up. These would be readings like controller position, orientation, motion data, and even pressure-sensitive switches, I guess, in the back of the controller itself. So think about that. Just the way that you normally hold a controller and maybe even grip the controller with maybe where your hand is, any type of like, I guess, pressure from your fingers just from holding it would be read by the controller, and it would say, oh, okay, we know who that is. That's Spawn. Let's just go ahead and log him right in. That's actually I like that idea a lot. That's pretty cool to think about just picking up, but I also wonder what happens if it gets it wrong. It says it has a confidence algorithm that it would run, and then it would go, okay, we're not 100% sure if that's that person or it's not good enough, so we just won't log them in. But if it worked and it worked well, that'd be a pretty big game changer, just be able to pick up the controller and it log you in. Next up, let's talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's a game that when it was unveiled, the Yakuza fan base was not at all sure about if they would like this game or how this would turn out because they're going turn-based RPG. I mean, I like that they're trying something different and new and they want to see if they can shake up the overall game itself, right, with something like this. But it came out in Japan. People seem to really like it overall, and we've been waiting for it to come out in the West. It's strange that it's going to be coming to Microsoft's next-gen platform first with the Series X, but you can still pick it up, obviously, on like your PlayStation 4. PS5 will just come later, but now we know when it is coming west, November 13th, and it's going to be out on the PlayStation 4. It'll also be out on the Xbox One, and it looks like it's going to come to the Series X, according to the listings and the information we have, when it comes out, when the system launches. So I almost wonder if the system launches the first week of November, as is currently being rumored, if Yakuza Like a Dragon would get like a week head start on the Series X as opposed to the other platforms, but it'll also be on Windows 10 and Steam, and it will be coming to the PS5 at a later time. Looking forward to this one. I'll be grabbing it day one. Maybe right away on the Series X, and I do think that's where I'm going to grab it though either way, because it'll be I think a pretty good game along with Cyberpunk to grab on next-gen platforms to really try it out. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about some images of the RTX 3090 that were supposedly put out there. This made the rounds very quickly. People started to really look into these images, deep dive and all this stuff, and compare them and try to figure out how close it was. There were some accusations of them changing and altering the overall size of the video card, but it seems like they literally just placed it on the table and took pictures of them. Anyway, here's a couple of the images, and you can see right away that's an RTX 2080 next to a massive video card, and that apparently is the RTX 3090. Now, NVIDIA should be unveiling this in about a week now. On the 1st, we should get some kind of presentation, and they'll be showing off what I think will be their entire line of video cards almost. At first, I figured they would just show their big video cards, like a 3090 and a 3080, but word is that they are going to show up with like all of their video cards ready to go. And we had some pricing from this same person. I do question when we hear pricing along all of this. However, cards are starting to show up apparently in marketing, and they're trying to get all of that ready. But the listing for this card, the 3090, at this time is $1,400. Video card prices have gone crazy, haven't they? But then we also have other listing prices, the 3080 at $800, the 3070 at $600, and the 3060 at $400. You know what? Those prices are very believable. So I'm kind of on board with some of those. I mean, a $1,400 3090 is a bit out there, but that would be their top of the line card. And maybe that means you'll be able to get 60 frames per second at 4K in Flight Simulator. I would hope so if you spend $1,400, although it seems like there's some CPU issues in that game as well. It's the new Crysis, basically. Yeah, so a 3090 at $1,400. I'm curious how many people are going to jump on that one as opposed to look at something like maybe the 3070 at $600. It's going to come down to the performance versus the price, but also performance versus previous generation cards, because then you might have a whole flood of older RTX cards hit the market, and that might be the best place to strike for that price to performance ratio. As for these images, I mean, it's hard to say. We've seen a lot of stuff leak out just through images and no one really believed them, right? And then they end up being correct. This is so ridiculous. You know what? I think it might be real. It's a triple slot 3090, which we've had triple slot cards in the past, but this looks like it's the entire stack. Like, it's just this massive video card, tons of power, I'm sure, going to it. It'll be fun to see how that turns out. Maybe they'll show us some cool performance. I'm sure they'll lean into ray tracing and deep learning as well. Tons of all kinds of cool demonstrations, I'm sure, that'll be coming up on the 1st. I'll be checking that out, and we'll see how close this aligns. And how do they tell us that it is this massive a card? Do they hold it up? Like with two hands, I guess? And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Squishy Doo saying, I wish I could sub to a version of your channel that only had confirmed content news and less speculation and rumors. Feels like doing these almost daily results in a lot of padded rumor mill content. Lately, I'm really noticing I'm just skipping your videos from time to time based on their titles. And that tends to happen with the 24-hour news cycle that we try to look at. Okay, what's the last 24 hours? What are people talking about? What are people sending me to take a look at? And yes, the last 24 hours, it seemed to be this Switch Pro, Switch revision. The past 24 hours before that, it was Nintendo Direct stuff, but then it was also like Microsoft backing Epic Games, right? It was even NHL 21. I see the comments down there. I was like, yeah, let's go over the release date for that, right? Let's talk about DLSS. And yes, I've basically taken Newswave and it's kind of turned into what's been going on online for gaming in the last 24 hours and what really are the important piece of information with some opinion thrown in there. So yeah, Newswave has evolved over time into what I think is a better and more interesting show at times. But every weekday morning we're here. So we got 24 hours to look over things, then we decide what goes in, we cut it, edit it, put it out, and I think it's worked out pretty well so far. But yeah, I get it. Not every topic's gonna be for everyone. We put the timestamps in to try to help out with that. So here's hoping Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft do start talking about, you know, some gaming news. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether there's this reported Switch revision. Do you think it's even happening? And if so, what would you like to see added to it? I kind of think if it's not happening at the beginning of this next year coming up, then Nintendo's just gonna work towards the next generation Switch, you know, in a year or two after that. It seems like this would be the time to do it. And I feel like we've said that like every year over the last 3 years, right? So hey, 5th time's a charm. Also, what do you think about Yakuza Like a Dragon? Are you picking that up and what platform? And are you getting any of these new RTX cards? Are you looking forward to this NVIDIA presser? And which card on that list with that pricing do you think you would grab? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.